Warning, this video contains major spoilers up through Dark Age. Lorn Arcos was Primus of the Arcos family, one of the three great Martian houses. Known as the Rage Knight, a philosopher, and the teacher of the greatest warriors in the society, Lorn likely has the most far-reaching influence of any Gold alive during the events of the series. His overwhelming popularity and the respect held for him by Golds and other colors alike is apparent in his constant quotation and the admiration held for him by our main character Darrow. Lorn is a fascinating and complex character, and Darrow puts it best when he says that if all Golds were like him, Reds would still toil beneath the earth, but he would have them know their purpose. It doesn't make him good, but it makes him true. The vast majority of Lorn's life and development as a character takes place before 736 BCE, or the beginning of Red Rising, and with his death in the second book, we honestly don't get much time with him. However, with the detail we receive on his history, his actions during Red Rising and Golden Sun, and the effects that he has on characters long after his death, there is more than enough to discuss and analyze in this video. Pierce Brown has talked about potentially writing a spin-off book about Lorn's life and time as Rage Knight of the Society, but until the in-universe Stoneside actually comes out, I hope that this video will satisfy those looking for a detailed look at Lorn. Without further ado, let's begin with Lorn's upbringing and life before the events of Red Rising. Despite his higher status, even among Golds, Lorn's unnamed father gave him a harsh upbringing. Lorn was kept from technology, culture, and civilization by a man from an era so steeped in war that he fell in 8 iron rains, a violent method of invading a planet. To paint a picture of what his father was like, Lorn mentions that he lived to the age of 163 without cellular rejuvenation therapy, which is impressive even given Gold physiology. Lorn maintains a respectfully neutral tone when discussing his father, but other than taking after his considerable martial prowess, Lorn couldn't be more different from the man. His house is friendly and full of love, even towards low colors. Almost all of the major events in Lorn's life that we know of come from after his appointment as Rage Knight. However, there is one anecdote about his early life that I think speaks volumes to who he is as a person. On Mercury, in the city of Tyche at the Ancestor Bridge, Lorn was said to have wept as a young man when he saw the messenger planet at sunset for the first time. The gentleness he lived with was not just a product of the events of his long life. He was clearly a deeply sensitive soul from a young age, despite his father's manner of raising him. In the early 670s BCE, Lorn was appointed to the position of Rage Knight of the 12 Olympics by reigning sovereign Ovidius Aulun. This is one of the 2 titles that Lorn is most famous for, and he continues to be referred to by it even after his retirement. Only a few years later, in 676 BCE, Lorn would attend the Martian wedding of Nero Augustus and Iona Apollona as the sovereign's representative. However, his real purpose there, on the orders of Ovidius, would be to support the sovereign's daughter, Octavia Aulun, in the removal and execution of Mars's archgovernor Silas and his house, along with the appointment of Nero as archgovernor of Mars. Nero murdered his new wife Iona and sent a box with her head in it to the Bellona as they returned to their home on the Olympus Mons. This act was revenge for Silas and the Bellona's defeat and murder of Nero's entire family 20 years prior. Lorn references this event as he expresses his distaste for Nero and the type of man he is. Lorn consistently emphasizes that he was doing as he was commanded, which shows an attempt to wash his hands of the events that had transpired. He also seems to dislike the political nature underlying Octavia supporting Nero, which led to an interesting event that we know nothing about Lorn's participation in, Octavia's coup against her father. In 681 PCE, Octavia Aulun would launch a successful coup against her father Ovidius, executing him and taking the morning throne for herself as the new sovereign. Lorn's role in this is noticeably not mentioned. Did he defend his sovereign or support Octavia's party? What seems most likely to me, given his desire for neutral status in later years, is that he stood apart, potentially on the grounds that Olympic Knights served the compact and the society, and not the sitting sovereign themselves. In August of that same year, the Moon Lords, either in disagreement with Octavia or simply taking advantage of the chaos to achieve their long-coveted independence, would launch their first rebellion. Lorn would fight on Octavia's side, notably sporting a scar on his neck earned from a stain during one of the battles of the rebellion. This seems like a good time to mention one of the noteworthy events in Lorn's early life, as well as his relationship with another one of the most important figures in the society. Magnus Augrimus, the Primus of House Grimus and father of Octavia's 3 Furies, more often referred to as the Ash Lord, seems to view Lorn as something of a rival. One way we know this is through his daughter Atlantia's recounting of how he thought he would eventually die at the hands of Lorn. In addition to this, Lorn and Magnus famously dueled as youths, though the exact or even rough time on that is unclear, and Lorn still bears a scar from that event. Lorn clearly felt very differently about Magnus. He expressed his horror at the Ash Lord's burning of Rhea, and for the most part disregards the man. In general, Lorn is incredibly polite when talking about anyone. He seems to live by the saying, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Usually, when he dislikes someone, he instead describes their actions and lets those speak for themselves, a chief example of this being the story of Nero's ascendance to Archgovernor. His choice avoidance of discussing the Ash Lord, but clear distaste for the event he is most famous for, leads me to believe that he despises the man, though he would never say it outright. Before I move on from the Moon Lord's rebellion, I have to bring up how Lorn earned his other famous moniker. The nickname Stoneside is so widespread that it seems most don't even know where it comes from, at least among Darrow's generation. In a game of lies, Octavia reveals to Darrow that it happened on a campaign during the Moon Rebellion. Lorn was famous for eating anything, and a Grey bet him he couldn't eat stones, a challenge from which Lorn didn't back down. The last major event in Lorn's life before the events of Red Rising was his training of Aja Algrimis in his famous form of Cravat, the Willow Way. Aja would be his last student for 30 years before Darrow, and second to last overall. The two clearly hold a great deal of respect for each other, but their relationship is complicated by circumstances and loyalties. As for the results of his training, Aja ascended to the position of Protean Knight, becoming her master's colleague among the Olympics. She is easily among the most terrifying warriors in the society, if not the single greatest herself, and this is evidenced strongly by Lorn's saying, "Never fight a river, and never fight Aja." There is one great tragedy of Lorn's life that I haven't mentioned yet, the death of most of his sons. We don't know exactly when each of these happened, but it seems like they were all claimed by war, heavily contributing to Lorn's disillusionment with both war and the society. He does have one son remaining by the time the series begins, Brutus au Arcos, but he too would meet a tragic fate, which we will get to soon. Now, with all events before 736 PCE out of the way, we can get to Lorn's participation in Red Rising. In addition to his position as Rage Knight, Lorn also serves as one of the drafters for the Martian Institute's House Mars. He ends up advocating for Darrow incredibly early in the draft, and expresses a clear personal interest in Darrow during his time at the Institute. He gives Darrow his Pegasus pendant and knife ring back, and all but outright says that he wishes to take Darrow into his house. Darrow would ultimately not take this offer, as his ambitions led him to the most powerful house on Mars, Augustus, instead of the third most powerful. Darrow sees Lorn immediately after winning the Institute, but we don't get to see the two interact, as Augustus gets to Darrow first. Lorn would later express his bitterness that Darrow didn't join him, but despite Darrow snubbing Lorn to join House Augustus, their relationship would not end after the Institute. Lorn would end up training Darrow in the Willow Way every single morning during Darrow's time between winning the Institute and enrolling at the Academy, or during the 3-year time skip between Red Rising and Golden Sun. This training was grueling and secretive, and Darrow notes that he missed out on events with friends and fellow Lancers because of it. While it seems like Darrow didn't have to pay with the deeds to moons, as Lorn has been offered before for his training, they did have a special deal where Darrow could exchange 2 bottles of Lagavulin whiskey for 2 extra hours of training. This seems like exactly the type of alcohol a rugged old man like Lorn would favor over the champagnes and wines favored at the parties of pixies. In the year 739 PCE, 2 years before the start of Golden Sun, Lorn would tragically lose his last son, Brutus au Arcos, and daughter-in-law Anastasia au Lune, to a supposed terrorist attack by Outriders from the Rim. Many years later, on her deathbed, Love Knight Calendora au San would reveal to Lorn's grandson Lysander au Lune that their deaths were actually the work of Octavia herself and were carried out by Calendora and Atlantia Algrimis. Anastasia and Brutus had conspired to overthrow Octavia because they feared the way she was ruling the society and were horrified by the burning of Rhea. Lorn knew nothing of these details, but he blocked out even mentions of rumors about the dubious circumstances of their deaths. I believe this was because Lorn was already beyond broken at this point. What he would have done with this information is anyone's guess, but whether it would have been something tragic like taking his own life or perhaps turning on his sovereign, it's maybe for the best that he never learned. Lorn was long disillusioned by the dream of gold, and this event would be his breaking point. After Darrow left for the Academy, he retired from his position as Rage Knight, took his remaining family from their home of Elysium in Cimmeria on Mars, and settled on Europa, one of Jupiter's many moons. Lorn may have lost all of his sons, but most of their wives and many of his grandchildren and even great-grandchildren still lived. After over 100 years of life and more experiences than anyone could ever want, Lorn just wanted to fade in peace, but as we learn in Golden Sun, the strong always have a part. Lorn wouldn't even manage a year of peace with his family before he was dragged into conflict again. The Martian civil war between Houses Augustus and Bellona broke out due to Darrow's violent inciting actions at the Luna Summit, and both sides would make a bid for Lorn's support. Since the Bellona had the support of the Sovereign, Octavia sent a Praetorian death squad led by Protean Knight Aja Algrimis and the traitor Tactus au Wrath to Lorn's estate on Europa in January of 742 BCE. Augustus's chief politico, Pliny Velociter, had betrayed to the sovereign Darrow's plan to petition Lorn for support in an attempt to seize House Augustus and the archgovernorship of Mars for himself. Lorn would desperately attempt to maintain neutrality by saving his last student, but Darrow would force his hand and make it seem as if Lorn had betrayed Aja instead. It's hard to describe just how much this hurt Lorn. To be betrayed by not just one but both of his last two students, and given how he saw Darrow like the sons he lost, it is surprising that he ends up siding with Augustus, though it was ultimately Darrow's more logical arguments on the state of things and how they would appear that won Lorn over. I've already covered much of what was discussed in Darrow and Lorn's conversation throughout this video by approaching things chronologically. The only other detail from it worth sharing at this point is that we learned that Lorn somehow observed the duel between Darrow and Cassius on Luna, whether through a holo or something else, and he has some comments on it. He criticizes Darrow's sloppy showmanship and points out a better technique that could have been used, which Darrow glosses over but uses as evidence that Lorn still cares greatly for Darrow. Darrow correctly ascertains that fact, but we as the audience get to see a glimpse of Lorn's perfectionism in his craft and his teaching methods. In the skirmish on Europa, Aja would manage to escape capture by Darrow's forces, and Tactus would flee to Lorn's estate and take his hiding family hostage, killing many servants along the way. Despite Darrow diffusing the situation and reconciling with Tactus, Lorn demanded Tactus face consequences for his actions and murdered him as soon as his family was safely out of the room. This typical display of gold brutality is a sad thing to see from one of the golds that Darrow actually admires, but Lorn would slowly start to show some willingness to change. Throughout the next couple months, Lorn would fully devote himself to Darrow's cause, though not without some grumbling along the way. I was honestly surprised that Lorn didn't drag his feet more, but whether he was convinced by other factors along the way, or simply convinced himself fully to the side that he is on, Lorn was invaluable as an advisor and resource in the war effort. On a mission to take back control of the Augustan fleet from Pliny after his betrayal, Lorn and Darrow have a conversation that sheds some light onto how he views certain low colors. His views are not quite as progressive as we may have previously been led to believe. Lorn feels very differently about the Obsidian in particular. He calls Ragnar Valaris it instead of he, while cautioning Darrow about him, and goes as far as to claim he isn't a person like other colors, but simply a weapon. It's easy to understand where Lorn's bias comes from. As somebody who has participated in countless battles, he's experienced some of the more unsavory tendencies of Obsidian at war. But of course, golds and greys can commit horrifying acts during war as well, and it's a shame to see this kind of racism from one of the more open-minded golds. The very presence of Lorn as Darrow came for Pliny was enough to sway many golds immediately back to the Augustan banner, and both Lorn and all those golds would answer Darrow's call for an iron reign on Mars. During Darrow's speech to the Augustan bannermen, Lorn would physically express how jaded he was with the oldest time calls for glory and honor. Despite all that he himself has won, he clearly doesn't believe in any of the myths of war anymore. Lorn and Darrow met before the siege, and we learn about a superstition among the older knights. Apparently they avoid washing their armor in fear of washing away the luck that has kept them alive so far. Given how long Lorn has fought, I imagine he is the worst smelling out of any of them. Lorn once again expresses bitterness to Darrow at what his friend and student has done to him, and he makes one last desperate plea for him to be better after this, no matter how things turn out. Lorn doesn't do this to guilt Darrow. He really and truly cares for him and just wants him to be the best man he can be. Or, as he said before, a good man, not a great man. Lorn imparts a few last things on Darrow before they separate. He becomes emotional, bringing up the deaths of his sons again, and tells Darrow that there is no such thing as dying well. When Darrow counters with the story of Achilles, Lorn claims that Achilles was a warning, not a hero, and then Lorn has one of his biggest moments of development in the entire series. Lorn expresses regret at having killed Tactus. A man so sure of his actions and his convictions stutters and has his beliefs shaken. I'm going to talk about this more in another section of this video, but I think that this is Lorn's greatest moment in the series, when a gold of over 100 years and so steadfast in his ways is finally willing to change. They would win in the Siege of Mars, and in the time leading up to Darrow's triumph, Lorn would begin to develop a relationship with Victra Augulii and her house. They would form an alliance under the Augustans, and with that, the war against the Sovereign was looking more and more favorable. That was, of course, until tragedy struck at what would become known as the Bloody Triumph. Lorn was originally meant to present Darrow's ceremonial mask, but Darrow's friend Roque Alphabii asked for the honor instead. Adrius Augustus had discovered Darrow was a red from former Sons of Ares member Harmony, who betrayed them after learning that Ares himself, Fishner Albarca, was a gold. A faction of Adrius, Roque, Antonia Auseverus, and the Sovereign's people infiltrated the Triumph with weapons and paralyzing agents. Lorn would be murdered at the hands of Lilith Alpharan, slitting his throat from behind, and Adrius planting an ion knife in his belly, mocking his name as he died. The grandchildren Lorn brought with him were presumably killed as well, on the orders of Antonia. For myself, and I imagine many others, this is by far one of the most tragic moments in the series. The deaths and betrayal are something straight out of ancient Greek theater. I think Lorn, after all of Darrow's mistreatment, and who just desired peace, has the most tragic death out of anyone. Even his enemies expressed their regret at his death, saying that he was simply on the wrong side, and that they still admired him. Lorn's tale isn't a happy one, and it epitomizes one of his own sayings. For those who dine with war and empire, the bill always comes at the end. Now that we have covered all of the events of Lorn's life and death, we can get a little bit into his legacy. The remnants of House Arcos would ultimately side with the Rising and eventually the Republic, through Virginia Augustus, and among Lorn's prominent living descendants would be his grandsons Lysander au Lun and Alexander au Arcos. As of the making of this video, Book 6 is still yet to be released, so we don't know the direction that Lysander takes, but as of right now, I believe one of the two has easily proven themselves to be the true heir of Arcos. Alexander has one of the single greatest moments of any character in the entire series, as he risks his life to save as many low colors as he can, while refusing the peerless scar Darrow offers him in favor of a Howler's wolf cloak. Lysander has fallen for the dream of gold, and as of right now hasn't evolved past that. He dishonorably kills his cousin and continues to seek to restore the flawed society and color hierarchy. Alexander has a short, but I believe complete character arc. He really does end up being everything I had originally hoped Lorn could be. Even though the Arcos family couldn't escape yet another tragedy through grandson killing grandson. I'll hopefully be making a video on those two later, or perhaps they'll be a part of a more comprehensive House Arcos video. Before we go, I think there's one incredibly interesting question to consider. Would Lorn have joined the Rising? Unfortunately, the simple canon answer from Pierce Brown's mouth is no. On tour, Pierce said that if he told him right off the bat, Lorn would have just cut his head off. I think that the room for debate there comes from the wording of right off the bat. The way that Lorn learned about Darrow would have mattered greatly. Lorn proved his ability to change by expressing remorse for Tactus's death, and given the right circumstances, I'm sure he could have joined the Rising in one way or another. Thank you very much for watching. This video, and any future ones I may create, are just an attempt to channel my love for Red Rising into something creative. I would love to hear any feedback you may have about anything in the video, and of course would appreciate it if you could like and subscribe as well. I have an absurd number of videos planned, ranging from character profiles to color overviews to technology and organizations, and I would love suggestions as well. Let me know if there's anything in particular you would like to see next, and I hope you enjoyed.